Hello, and welcome to the Cape Coffee Beans podcast. My name is Faden, and I'm the founder of Cape Coffee Beans, South Africa's leading retailer in the specialty coffee space. We sell everything you need to make an amazing cup of coffee at home, at the office, in the cafe, or even on the road, including equipment, accessories, and artisan roasted coffee beans, both online and in store at our headquarters in Claremont, Cape Town. This podcast is a deep dive into the world of South African specialty coffee with a focus on the brands, the businesses, and the people in the local coffee scene, many of whom I'm privileged to work with. I'll be bringing you interviews with many of these South African coffee heroes, so please do subscribe to the podcast and share it with your coffee-loving friends. Thank you for your support. Now let's get to today's episode. Before we get to today's interview, let me start with a short introduction. In today's episode, I interview David Donde, the founder and owner of Truth Coffee Roasting, and also part of the original founding team of Origin Coffee Roasting that you may have heard about in the last episode. Now, Truth Coffee Roasting is a very well-known brand. They've kind of risen to a great deal of fame quite quickly. And I think that one of the things that Truth has done exceptionally well is make more South Africans aware of specialty coffee. As I mentioned in this episode, Truth is a brand that seems to have far reach in the country and beyond. And at the epicenter of everything that Truth has achieved is a cafe that's won an accolade, at least according to a couple of publications, of being the greatest cafe in the world. I think that David is a passionate speaker for specialty coffee and has interesting perspectives on many things in the industry. I really enjoyed interviewing him and getting his perspectives, and I hope you enjoy it too. Now, on to the episode. Hello, David. Thank you very much for joining the Cape Coffee Beans podcast.
Hi.
So, David, you are the owner and founder of Truth Coffee Roasting, and I've had the privilege of working with you and your company for quite some time. As you might know, I'm in the process of interviewing the people behind all of the coffee brands that we work with, and so I'm certainly excited to have you on the show. I think that Truth is a brand that many people in the coffee space and outside of the coffee space recognize. So I'm sure that many people will be excited to hear your story. And before we get into the coffee stuff, which I'm sure that we will get into, I thought it might be interesting for people to hear a little bit about your personal background. You know, what were you doing before you got into coffee?
I got into coffee the standard traditional way through chicken farming. I've never been one to do one thing, but started off studying design, getting thrown out of that, ending up working on the family farm. I established a free-range egg brand, which was something pretty unique back then, and sort of started to understand the importance of quality brand and doing the right thing back then. At the time, we were the largest free-range egg farmers in the country. Then went on to be a hotelier, half a dozen other things, and then co-founded Origin in 2005, I believe it was, after roasting for 2 or 3 years in my little country hotel, where a few of us who started what's considered the specialty industry as roasters met up back in 2003. And then in 2009 started up Truth.
Right. And so I guess your interest in coffee kind of blossomed in those days when you were running the hotel in Greyton, is that right?
Actually, before that, on my farm, I had a pretty well-known farm stall called the Barnyard Farm Stall, where the Norville Art Foundation is today, right opposite the American Embassy. And I thought I made a pretty good cup of coffee, and I'd have people from Australia and New Zealand come in, and they'd go, "Oh, we hear you've got great coffee," and I would rush to the espresso machine and make a cup and look at that expression of horror on their face as I made something with froth and sprinkles and coffee that was so dark roasted that the oils were appearing on the surface of the beans. That was actually my requirement from the roasters. Went off to New Zealand during this time for my brother's wedding and discovered the first specialty coffee roastery I'd ever been into. That was around 1999, I guess. And it was Cafe Lafari, it was called. It was one of the first big independents to be sold. I went to a Japanese company, but it opened my eyes, and I bought a book there written by a guy called David Donde on espresso coffee technique. And that changed my life, and the rest is history. And that got me needing fresh coffee for my hotel in Greyton, and nobody prepared to supply me with fresh coffee. So one guy said, well, I can't supply you coffee on a weekly basis, but I can sell you a small roaster. So I bought that roaster and off I went.
Right. Okay. So that's how it all started. Now, Joel,
Yep.
on a recent interview with him, mentioned that that was the first decent coffee that he'd had in the Western Cape. So I guess that's all
Yeah.
part of the history of specialty coffee in Cape Town.
Well, we didn't start specialty coffee. That is, I can credit to two other groups of people. That would be Seattle Coffee Company. I think they were number one to do specialty, although they weren't roasting. And then the guys who made coffee cool were Vida, and me moving back to Cape Town and Joel suggesting, well, let's open up a roastery together. That was the beginning of specialty from bean to cup.
Right. Right. And so the listeners will have heard Joel talk about the beginnings of Origin, and obviously you were part of that organization. But maybe we can fast forward a little bit and tell me about how you came to start Truth, and what did the beginnings of your current business look like?
So 2009, I'm left down to my last 15 rand in my pocket, and I get a call saying I'll back you. And I had a tonne and a half of coffee that various friends and clients had promised to bring over to me. And off we went, and I bought a little tiny little Probat. I think it was a 10 or a 12 kilogram Probat at the time, into a space that was a mausoleum, and it was just super cheap space. Got to start roasting, and to this day, not one of those 1.5 tons has ever materialized. Not a single kilo ever came to pass. But we built it from scratch. Fast forward 3 years from that, I was looking for an opportunity where I could build an incredible cafe. We wanted to build one of the world's best coffee roasteries, and we wanted to build it with a steampunk theme. And I found the perfect building. At the end of that year, the end of 2012, we opened up the cafe as we've become to be known, and we built it around our big coffee roaster Colossus, which is around 1947, which I rebuilt myself and added modern computerization. And I'm proud to say today, I think it's the only biofuel coffee roaster in the world.
Right, right. And so when you first opened, I take it it was a wholesale business, and then in 2012 is when the cafe started. Is
No,
that right?
2009 was a small cafe. I think we did about 100 cups a day in Greenpoint.
Yeah.
It had a wholesale component, and it gradually picked up and picked up. And by the time we moved into the store in Batencumbe Street, we were pretty much an established wholesale business at that point. And then we struggled to get our permit to open. To open, we needed an occupation certificate. It was pretty easy. All we needed for an occupation certificate was the fire chief to sign off on us, and the fire chief would sign off on us. So that was also easy as soon as our building plans were approved. The building plans would get approved the moment the fire chief signed off on it. And we got stuck in this gap where we just couldn't open. And at the time, we cried out to Alan Windy. He had his red tape program that had just started, and he managed to get it through that both the fire chief and the planning permission guys met together and signed us off, and we could open our doors.
Right, and this is the cafe that you're now in, which has won the accolade in at least a few publications of best cafe in the world.
Yeah, but what do they say? Democracy is in the counting, not in the voting. Yeah.
Well, so tell me, other than having this cafe, which I would strongly encourage anybody who hasn't visited it once this lockdown is over, it definitely is one of the places in Cape Town that you have to visit if you're a coffee lover. But how else has your business evolved since those early days? What else are you guys doing now?
I think the point that we started to kick off on. So I'd helped build Origin, which was all about where the beans came from and the geekiness and lots of different options and origins, hence the name. I had to go into competition with essentially what felt like myself. A potential client would say, "Why should I buy from you when I can buy from you?" And we had to understand what our point of difference was, and we decided that it was about the pleasure in the cup. Yes, we would always do the ethical thing. Yes, we would always source the best coffees we could find, pay a fair price for them, and be part of the solution, not part of the problem. But it was always about delivering flavor in the cup and what was the method that it was going to be made on, and not get people stuck in the paradox of choice, of not understanding what was in front of them, having staff able to explain all the coffees that we had because we had a small enough list, and understanding the utility of that cup rather than what clever people we were making the cup. So that led us to statements like flavor, not bitterness, no sugar required, where we were trying to get through. This was about the flavor in the cup, not about, how snobbish I am with my fancy cup of coffee in front of me. And all of that was fine. And we were chasing these beautiful coffees with acidity. And about 4 years ago, I was judging a coffee competition in New York, and I was sitting with I think I was sitting with Anne from Copy and Lem Butler, and I can't remember who else. I think Gwilym was sitting with us at the time. And we were all just rolling our eyes after yet another highly acidic coffee that was just so, it was good, it was great, but like we were all going, do I want to finish this cup? And suddenly I had this epiphany that it wasn't, great coffees happen to have acidity in them. It wasn't about the acidity. And from that moment, I was chasing something new. I was chasing natural sweetness in the cup. And I actually decided to produce the black honey then and there, sitting there. I had this moment of epiphany blend, which was always going to be about the sweetness in the cup, before I knew how I was going to create it or what coffees it would take. And realizing that we weren't asking the right question. We've always been about first principle thinking, but the right question wasn't, where's the acidity, but where do I find that sweetness and joy in the cup? And of course, that's going to be wrong in a couple of years when we ask a better question.
Sure. Well, and I know that the Black Honey blend, obviously we were working with you when that blend was released, and I certainly have seen that it's become one of the very popular coffees that people buy at Cape Coffee Beans. And, listening to you talk about what your intentions were with the business makes me think a lot about the type of customers that the Truth brand attracts in our little world. And one of the things that I've always marveled at is that Truth is the brand that on our website will often attract first-time specialty coffee drinkers from around the country. We'll send Truth coffee to remote parts of Gauteng and remote parts of the Free States, and people who've heard of the Truth brand and probably haven't had any contact with specialty coffee before, but the Truth brand is the one that seems to speak to them and attract them. And I guess that ties very closely to the objective that you set.
Yeah, exactly. Can we bring you pleasure in the cup? That's the question we keep asking. And today we've replaced all those mission statements with a new little piece of philosophy, which is the joy of the extraordinary truth. And everything we do has to satisfy those three pillars. Is it extraordinary? Does it bring joy? And is it truth? And if it doesn't, we can't do it. And if it does, we're on the right track. And that joy has got to be, whether it's customers, suppliers, staff, we've got to get it right. Of course, we're never good enough. It's never extraordinary enough. It never brings enough joy. We're going to disappoint from time to time. And, sometimes are we as truthful as we ought to be? I think those three words are very hard taskmasters, and we just keep trying to live up to them. It's of course harder than what is possible, and we're comfortable with that.
And what else do you think distinguishes Truth from other small coffee businesses out there? Because I don't think anybody can deny that in a relatively short space of time, you've really captured the attention of a lot of the local and the international market. What do you think those distinguishing factors are, other than those that you've already mentioned?
I think the flavor is the first pillar. I think the next pillar is deep thinking and questioning what we do and why we do it and how we do it, but really the why all the time. And I think that's important. But I think the next phase is also important. We're not just garagistas doing cool stuff. We're trying to run a business and we're trying to do things as well as we can possibly do it. And we want our execution to be good and we want our messaging to be good. And maybe it's a deep belief in the brand is everything we do. And we don't think that we do anything perfectly, far from it. And we're always striving for a better way. And I think you can't focus on that kind of detail and not have it resonate with a sector of the market. We don't make everybody happy. A lot of people want cheaper coffees, and we respect that. A lot of people want very roasty profiles of their coffee, and we've never wanted the roast to speak. We've always wanted the bean to speak. And I always give the analogy with hi-fi. An incredible hi-fi doesn't change your music. It's transparent to your music. It lets the music come through. And if we're doing our job well, we buy great beans, and our job is to stay out of their way, not screw it up. And I think our loyal and loving customers, the ones that show us the most love, share that philosophy and joy with us.
Absolutely. Well, you do seem to have that segment of passionate followers. So I think it obviously is speaking to them. Tell me, you alluded to it here, but I'd love to hear a little bit more, and I'm sure the audience would love to hear a little bit more about your specific approach to sourcing and roasting.
So when it comes to sourcing, we've got long established relationships with various farms through brokers who don't sit there as firewalls, but sit there as matchmakers. And their percentage that they're making is fixed, and we know what the farmer is getting, and it's important to us to pay a fair price. We don't believe in fair trade. We've always paid a premium way above fair trade, which the other responsible roasters do too. I'm not claiming to be the only space. It's always been important to us to have that connection back to the roasters. In many cases, the roasters have been friends. The growers have been friends. In fact, I was stuck in New York once with nobody to help me at a stand, and one of our growers jumped on the stand with me. It was incredible. We get to share those experiences all over the world, and we're lucky enough to work with the best people. When it comes to roasting, I've tried to teach a culture of empirical learning, where we don't believe we know how to roast coffee, and we don't believe anyone else does either. We believe in trying what we think will work, what worked for a similar coffee, or what we think is a similar coffee, roasting it, tasting it, and then trying some experiments and seeing what works better for that particular coffee, drunk in the way that we intended to be drunk, and then continually adjusting. Every single roast that we ever do is scored separately, and we assign points to the score. A better score becomes our profile roast. A worse score has us looking at what we did wrong. A better score has us looking for what we did right and enhancing what we did right until that effect drops off. So it's this continuous process of improvement. And we believe that our roast improves all the time. Also, I believe what you measure improves. So we look at when last we rejected a roast, and the number of days since a rejection is a really meaningful number to us. I'm proud to say I think our last rejection was December last year, which is really cool. And beyond that, how many profiles did we record? And that's also something that our team is very proud of, how many new profiles we've got. And it's always a big deal when we do that, even if we do it 3 times in a day, or we might not do it once for 10 days. But it's always a very cool thing that happens.
Right. And I imagine with your roaster, which is, I think you said it's a 50 kilogram roaster, isn't it? You're probably roasting in quite large batches.
Yeah, we've got 2 roasters, the ones what we call a bag roaster. I think it's technically a 70 or 75 kilo roaster, and we find that we can get good roasts through to about 60 kilograms, sometimes a bit lower. We've actually dropped it to like 56, 57 kilograms at the moment. And then we've got a second roaster, that's an old Probat, and we have a second roaster for small batches, which is a 7 kilo roaster. Right.
And tell us about
Sorry, we have one more. We have a baby little profile roaster, which the only thing it doesn't do is work for profiles, but it lets us check if we want to buy a coffee or not.
Right, gotcha. Okay. And tell us a little bit about your organization and your team. Who are the people that work with you? What does the Truth team look like?
So if you'd asked me this question 3 months ago, I would have described lots of different teams to you, but now it's a little different. So we've got our core coffee team, Alyssa, who's head of coffee. We've got Trevor, who's been with us some time on the roasting, Ollie, who's joined us on the roasting. And then our baristas are rotated through the roasting program so that their skills are going up all the time.
Mm,
And the roasting team is pushed out into customer service as well all the time. So we've got this exchange of ideas and knowledge going through. And then, of course, there's the restaurant side of things, which has a whole different team, some secret businesses, which you've got to get an invitation to be invited to, which are different teams, and a very strong operations and admin team that I'm very proud of.
right, yeah, and I've had the pleasure of working with and interacting with many of the people on your team. I know that there are definitely some very passionate coffee lovers there.
Yes.
Um, Absolutely. And tell me, what do you think the future holds for Truth? Where do you see things going in the next couple of years?
It's a scary time right now. This interview is happening the day before we enter stage 4 of COVID. We've been in lockdown for 5 weeks. We haven't done a cent of trade. It's pretty scary for me and even more scary for my crew. Money's tight for many of them, as you can understand, and we're helping out where we can. And we've got to get back to where we were, and that's going to be a long time coming. A fair amount of our business is international, and that's not going to exist. So we can chop 30% off. A lot of the hospitality industry that we currently supply are not going to survive this lockdown process. I'm hearing about more and more restaurants that are done forever, some that are done for a while. Some that are done for a while will try and reopen and not succeed. We're walking into a different world with a lot more unemployment than we had. I'm scared for South Africa, and I'm more scared for hospitality. You know, I read something very interesting this morning. We're sitting with, before COVID, 30% plus unemployment, depending on how one counts. And that is the conservative number. The higher number is the people who are not or have stopped looking for work. If you look at the Great Depression in the United States, that was around 20 to 22%. And we talk about that as devastating. What we have in South Africa was a crisis, is a deeper crisis now. And we have to innovate our way through it. It's not all doom and gloom. As entrepreneurs, as reasonably big employers, we've got 60 people that we look after. We've got a huge responsibility to get going and be successful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I'm sure that you've spent a lot of time thinking about this and nobody has the answers, but what do you think, how do you think the industry evolves in light of all the factors that you just mentioned?
I think the corollary for me is the December, January period that businesses in Cape Town enjoy, where you have 3 trading months in 2 months. December, January, you end up with a third month's worth of turnover for those 2 months. And I think what we've got now with COVID is a negative 3 months. We've had 3 months, a quarter of the year, disappear from our turnover by the time we wake up. Now, I don't know if I'm right about 3 months. It might look like 2 months turnover. It might look like 6 months turnover. But that turnover is never coming back. And we've got to start the wheels turning again and excite people about our products and get them to spend their money with us so our staff can spend our money with them, and the virtuous cycle keeps going. But we have to do that. We have to get the economy going, and the starting is through spending, and spending is only going to happen if we can convince people that our product is worthy. And the responsibility of all of hospitality is to create worthy product.
Absolutely. And maybe you can tell people who haven't visited Truth headquarters, what does that look like? What is on offer there other than the coffee that you're famous for?
So the coffee is the cornerstone of what we do. On a good day, we'll do about 1,400, 1,500 cups. On a bad day, which is today, we did zero. We are closed. But you're going to find a holistic environment where everything that we do has been considered. How you greeted, the uniform, the doorman at the front door, how you seated, the style of the menu. It's all been considered, and it's there to enhance your experience. The conversation that the waiter is going to have with you, what else is on offer, and you're going to get. I think our breakfasts are pretty damn good, if I say so ourselves. We've got a cocktail menu today that is funny, irreverent, and delicious. Delicious always being the important thing. We've got our own bakery, which is quite astounding. And just everything we do, we try and touch with excellence. We opened up just before we were shut down for the lockdown. We opened up a fresh juice bar, which is wonderful. We realized we had a responsibility to do it right. We were selling so much juice that actually buying bottled stuff was irresponsible, and we stopped doing that. And one of our waiters took it on as her project, Ursula, and we're very proud of the job she did for us. And yeah, we just keep innovating. And then the last product we launched just before shutdown was a collaboration with Frankie Fenner Meat Merchants, doing a steak with Cafe de Paris butter and chips on platforms like Mr. D and Uber Eats. So that'll be kicking up again from tomorrow morning.
Yes, of course, yeah, because food delivery is now going to be allowed. Well, that's great news, and that sounds like
Yeah.
a collaboration of all the things that I enjoy. So I may have to give that a try.
Well,
Um,
we expect your order to come through by 12 o'clock tomorrow.
you could look out for it, no problem at all.
Good.
Just shifting gears a little bit here, David, as we wrap up, I am very curious to hear, and I'm sure others would be curious to hear, what coffee are you drinking at home these days, and how are you making it?
So I'm going to tell everyone that I'm going to claim to make my coffee in a clever coffee dripper. But the reality is, I haven't done that for about 8 or 9 months, to my wife's disappointment, because facing timers at 6 o'clock in the morning didn't really appeal to me all that much. So I moved on to a KitchenAid siphon, which I used exclusively for a period of time, and I've now moved to a standard drip filter machine. It happens to be, I think it's a Siemens Porsche design one. The important thing to me being that the carafe doesn't have a heating element and goes into a vacuum pump. And I'm using a big industrial grinder with that, and I'm producing some stunning results with a artisanal Rwandan coffee that is my favorite, that just comes through with packets of sweetness and complexity. And I keep returning, going between that and black honey, and returning to this Rwandan that just has me captivated.
It's funny you say that. I mean, I also my morning routine is now a filter coffee machine. I'm using a Mocha Master, but there is this interesting um, this kind
Are
of
you using
return
the
to
mocha
filter.
pasta that goes into the glass pot?
That's right. Though my trick
Yeah.
is that I wait till the water is brewed through and then I switch off the heating element as quickly as I can to avoid too much contact from that.
The
And
trouble is that heating element needs to be disconnected. You actually need to dig in there with a screwdriver and unplug it. It's ruining your coffee before it even gets out.
yeah, no, admittedly, I would not advocate a heating plate to anyone in terms of a way to
No,
keep coffee warm. At the office, we use the version with the thermos, which I think is a better
which,
way to go.
which is on my highly recommended list. Yes.
But it is interesting how there is this kind of return to filter in the specialty coffee community, right? I don't think that we are the only people in the coffee world who are kind of maybe even, moving away a little bit from all the manual brewing stuff and just appreciating that a good quality filter machine and a good coffee will do the job very nicely.
Well, I mean, I've got to tell you, I'm lucky to be connected with most of the thought leaders in coffee, many of them as personal friends, and I have the privilege of judging at a very high level internationally. And none of those people that are referred to have an espresso machine at home, or certainly not one that is plugged in, switched on, and used. Many have it for when guests come over and then forget to switch it on and don't use it. So most of us are drinking black coffee at home just because of the ease, the quality, not having to clean a machine, which I think surprises people who are outside of the industry. But then we go through the geeky coffee methods of many of the pour over systems. And even in competition levels, sometimes they just don't work. They're too difficult, especially the ones where you're controlling your flow through grind size and distribution methods. It's temperamental. So I think there's a strong move to the easier methods, hence things like AeroPress or Clever Coffee Dripper, which is my personal favorite there, or simple filter machines like you're using or I'm using, because they make incredible coffee if you know how to get the proportions and the grind size right. It does take a little bit of fiddling and finessing. I mean, I weighed my dose until I got it right, and my grinder has a timer, so I'm on an exact weight and ratio. And it took me more than one or two attempts to get my grind size spot on until I had a ratio that worked. But now it's pretty much bulletproof.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you suggest, the place to invest may be the grinder, right? You can use a pretty basic and affordable coffee maker, but if you're going to spend extra money on your home setup, the grinder is probably where to put that money.
I have a grinder on my counter that has a humidity meter built into it that I've never looked at. It has a timer, it has a touchscreen, it has all sorts of things. But I've got it because it grinds incredible coffee. But the filter machine I bought off Gumtree for 250 Rand.
There you go, the ultimate illustration.
Yeah, the guy who lost all his awards said it's not about the bike, but it really isn't about the equipment, but it is about the grinder and the coffee. If you don't have capable equipment, it doesn't matter what coffee you've got, but no great equipment is going to turn poor coffee into good coffee. But if you've got adequate equipment with great coffee, that coffee will shine through. But yeah, totally, the place to spend the money is always the grinder.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, David, with that, I want to thank you very much for your time. It's been really good to hear a little bit more about your story and your perspectives on coffee. I'm sure that the listeners will enjoy hearing what you have to say as well. I hope that things continue to relax and work in favor of Truth Coffee going forward. And I would encourage anybody, once they're able to and it's legal again, to visit Truth Coffee headquarters in Cape Town and see what it's all about. It is definitely somewhere that if you love coffee, you should visit. And yeah, David, best of luck with things as the lockdown winds down. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you. And thank you anyone who's had the patience to listen to us to the bitter end.
And that concludes the second episode of the Cape Coffee Beans podcast. I hope you enjoyed that one. I certainly enjoyed catching up with David. Just a couple of short notes here before we close out. I did want to mention to you that if you want to support Truth Coffee, as you might already know, you can buy Truth Coffee Beans on the Cape Coffee Beans website. I will make sure to include a link to that in the show notes. And that is actually going to be true of all the roasters that we interview over these episodes and that we've interviewed in past episodes. So by all means, if you want to try their coffee and show them some support, please do go ahead and buy their coffee beans at Cape Coffee Beans. In terms of the podcast, I hope you're enjoying it so far. I still would encourage you to leave me some feedback. You can send it by email, on social media, or however else you see fit. It would also be really helpful to leave a review, subscribe on your favorite podcast player, and share it with your coffee-loving friends. With that, thanks very much for listening, and happy brewing.